Host guests and callers that are not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the STARS program, Seniors Taking Active Roles in Society, with your host, Anita Finley. Your comments and questions are welcome during today's broadcast. Call us toll-free at 888-721-0074. That's 888-721-0074. And now, here's your host, Anita Finley.
Good morning, everyone. Well, we've had a very interesting show so far, and now this is very special. It's special to me, but I think it's going to be special to you. I've asked Bill Finley, my husband, to come on the radio show because he is so symbolic of what happens as one ages, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean that someone's going to sit in a rocking chair and wait around for something to happen. You have to make it happen. And of course, you heard the show with Ted LaLiberty, who is the CEO of Boomer's Work, and he was talking about getting people back who had thought they were retired and getting them back into the workforce. So, Bill, thank you and welcome to our show this morning.
Well, I'm delighted to be up and around.
Right. At 90 years old, you're up and around for sure, I know.
And how?
Well, you know, Bill, the one thing that I thought we could discuss is many people have had successful careers as you have had, and then there comes a point where you're not in the everyday workforce and you wonder what you need to do. And so we had a discussion about this many years ago, and I think that people listening would really appreciate to hear what a man who has been successful thinks about and what he can do.
Well, I've been thinking about it since you invited me on the show. I haven't been on for about 15 years. And I began to focus on what happened to me when I was a teenager. I was a latchkey kid. My mother was a waitress. I have no brothers or sisters, aunts, uncles, or anything. And so she didn't have any skills other than being a waitress, so she bought a portable typewriter when I was in the 8th grade. And so because my handwriting was undecipherable, I had to learn to type everything at age 15. And it was a great breakthrough for me. As you said, I graduated from the University of California at Berkeley after World War II, and then went on to 50 years of a background and a lifetime profession of being a city planner, a developer, redeveloper, a professor, a whole variety of things until when I turned 80. I had run out of things to do, and you of all people said, "Why don't you write a book?" So I said, "Okay, what do I write about?" And so I looked it up in the Google, and they said, "Write what you know about." So it turns out that over the last 8 years, I've written 3 books that are radically different, and I'll just describe each one of them briefly, and then I'll tell you what's going on. The first book was about cities, naturally, because I'd been a city developer and a city official for a good many years, and I knew a lot about cities. And the first book was called Curing Urbanitis. Urbanitis is a name that I coined, which means the disease of metropolitan areas. I'll come back to that in a little while. So there was the first book about cities, and so that I got that done. And I said, well, now what should I write about? And so I decided I'd write about my experience in the service. During World War II, I was a bomber pilot flying out of England over Germany. Flew 35 missions, came out without a scratch, which was unusual because it was a very dangerous game. And so I decided to write a book about it's a novel. It's a crazy, wonderful novel about the war, airplanes, and a lot of daring-do activities, none of which that I did. I made them all up. And we named that book Air Force Cowboy.
And there's a lot of sex in that, Bill.
Right. Well, there was a lot of sex in the service, too. And that's been very popular with people who want to take the time and love flying or love wartime stories. There's a lot of people like that. then after that was done, I decided that I think I'll write another novel, but I think it has to, I've already done the war period, so I decided to write a book about science and sex. And this has to do with a guy who lives in Boca who turns a bit crazy and reinvents an earthquake machine which he can use to focus, and he can shake down buildings with his vibration machine. And that takes place all in Boca and in Brandy Breeze's, and it's an absolute fun book. And those three have kept me busy for the last eight years or so. And I'm now working on a book which is going to be a real blockbuster. Now that I'm 90, I've given myself 10 years to make a big project work, and it'll be out in about 6 months. Other than that, I have nothing to do.
But your dreams and your hopes are pretty big. You're not a small thinker, and so you take on very, very large ideas and projects. And I have to just tell you, everyone listening, that Bill and I, when we founded Boomer Times, it used to be called, well, it was Senior Life Communications Group. It started out as Senior Life. It was just it was an idea because I had become a gerontologist and I'd been making a lot of speeches. And then someone said, well, maybe you ought to have a newspaper or something. And we did it. And Bill was a very, very successful I would say businessman here in Palm Beach Gardens, working for the MacArthur Foundation as the head guy here of all their Florida properties, which was about $2 billion worth of properties. And so he allowed me the luxury of playing with this, what I thought I didn't know what was going to happen, this little newspaper, and of course doing the radio. So Bill has always been a big supporter of this. And when I went and became a gerontologist, Bill went back to school, even though he had a master's degree, he went back to school with me. So he would know a lot more about gerontology too. And I have to just appreciate Bill really here in front of everyone, because I don't think I could have done what I did without his support and his encouragement. And he has always been a very strong part of this whole process, whether he helps.
I think the turnaround is fair play. And that is that you have been wonderfully supportive of my writing, which has not produced very much cash in the last 8 years.
Never does, Bill.
And sounds like it. It's very discouraging to go into a bookstore today, like Barnes & Noble, and they must have hundreds and hundreds of new novels every week. And so I think I've decided to give up on novels. They're fun to write, but there are too many of them and too many exciting writers.
You know, Bill, it's a good thing that we're talking, because the board operator, who is a wonderful guy, Chris West, and I were talking about something, and we were discussing Obama's, growing up he really was from Chicago, and that there's terrible turmoil going on in Chicago. But that's what you're really dealing with this new book, with the cities, the big cities that are absolutely going crazy, and no one can even imagine what's going to happen over the next 25 years as you want to help everyone with this.
That's right. All the major cities in America, other than some of them up in the Rust Belt, meaning up in the northeast and in the Middle West, all the big cities are going to continue to grow rapidly, and they're already stretched beyond their ability to deal with traffic, with lousy schools, with air pollution, water pollution, and nobody is really in charge. And it turns out that, for example, in Palm Beach County, we have 37 independent cities in Palm Beach County that cooperate rarely on things, and so a lot of things just don't get done. One of the things we're facing now is what's called rising water, due to climate change and the melting of the ice cap and so on. And all our waterfront communities are going to be facing something they never dreamed they were going to have to deal with, and that is the water rising a few inches every year, and over 25 years or 30 years as the population grows and the waters rise, they're going to come together in a big clash.
Well, I'm going to give you a minute to take a break. Are you still there?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. You can take a break to maybe get a glass of water, do something, because I'm going to just tell everybody that the one thing that I noticed that Bill does, and I don't know how many of you sit and read newspapers still. I know you watch a lot of television, and Bill has been a New York Times reader for many, many years. Every morning, we get the Palm Beach Post because we live, in Palm Beach County. If we lived in Miami, he'd get the Miami Herald. But he reads 2 newspapers. He reads the New York Times thoroughly every single day, 7 days a week. And then he reads, of course, the Palm Beach Post for the local news, because Bill has started some not-for-profit organizations here. He actually was the founder of Sunfest. It was his idea. He's a big thinker, and it's been really a joy to live with him. This is a love fest, I think, this morning. That's what it's sounding like. But I just wanted him to share some of his ideas with everyone about maybe the cities and what you really would like to see if you could wave a magic wand, Bill. What you would like to see to happen let's just start with the United States, forget the rest of the world, and what you could do to create in the next 50 years, you wouldn't, but what would happen? Are you prepared for that?
Why won't I be around for the next 50 years?
Well, you'll be there in some way.
Everybody should know that as Anita has demanded I live to be 110. So I still got 20 years to go.
Good. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Then she claimed that I had the longevity gene.
Yes, you do.
I think a lot of people think that.
Still has most of his hair, yeah, and has his teeth, his own teeth. I mean, he's in good shape. He's a very, very, he's a remarkable man, and it's really a privilege to be married to him for almost 40 years now. And, well, it is 40 years, isn't it? And
40 years
yeah,
in
40.
October.
Okay. And to have someone who is so smart, and I always call Bill pretty brilliant, but in his field, it's an amazing field, and people look forward to talking with him because he has a very long view of what's going on. But let's get back to of your new book and what you think that you can do.
Book?
Well, yeah, the proposal, the book, but just in essence, though. Okay.
I think that when I faced the idea that I had maybe 10 years of good work in me, what's the one thing I could do that would be most valuable to American cities? And it turns out that the problem is that the cities in almost any metropolitan area, you go to Denver or Oklahoma City or Toledo or what have you, and there's typically a center city, and then they're surrounded by suburban communities, many of which were created so that the people from the center city wouldn't move out to the suburbs, mainly because they were black. And so now you have a center city that has its own problems and can't grow. It's got historic boundaries, and you got all these little towns around it that want to make sure nothing strange happens. And yet it turns out that my study of metropolitan areas that created my book called Curing Urbanitis, the only way these areas can solve their problems is by cooperation and working together. Nobody can do it by themselves. And yet the selfishness and the sense of identity in these little towns that surround the big cities make it almost impossible that anything to get anything done. There's going to have to be a major change in how growth is managed in the metropolitan areas. And it's not something that's welcome, but I think I have a plan that may sort of get people off the dime and start the cooperation that's going to take 10 or 20 years to become effective.
Bill, thinking about what you've just been saying, we now have something that has been a miracle in a way, the whole world of communication, that someone in one little town can know what someone else is doing in their little town. And somehow I think that even though it's confusing to many people to be able to see everything all the time, it's almost mind-boggling. There must be something in this that can help you to get the people who need to cooperate to cooperate.
Well, I think that sounds like a good idea. I'm not sure how it would work, one of the things that's happening with all the social media is the fact that people's time is taken up texting and calling their kids and calling their dog, and it doesn't mean they have any more time available just because they can communicate better. It's primarily, it's a matter of psychology and political will that all the changes can be made. I'm not sure I know how the new communication sciences are going to help.
Well, something makes me think that years ago, if a researcher was working on something very important in one little laboratory, across the world there could be another researcher doing the same thing, and they would never really be able to get together. It was more difficult. Today, anybody doing anything with the TED.com, you hear the people talking, from all over the world in this wonderful environment, and the same thing I think maybe with the cityscape.
Well, I think you have a good point. I didn't mean to sound negative, but I will say this: that any progress in reorganizing and reforming metropolitan areas that happens can be communicated to thousands of other places and people and leaders as soon as it occurs, and not they don't have to wait 10 years to find out what happened. So to the extent to which the communication allows people to point out and measure success, it would be all to the good.
Right, and so your plan, which is quite brave, and you've always said if you could just get everyone to cooperate, what a great world we could have, especially with cities where there's so much duplication. And I look back and I think about something. When you developed Columbia, Maryland with Jim Rouse, the one outrageous idea, which turned out to be okay, was that there would be no churches. And what the reason was, not because he didn't want religion, but because he said it's a waste to take all that money for bricks and mortar and have 5 at that time machines that would print things, or it was a duplication of everything. And it turned out to have one building, as you said, and then Friday night something happened, Saturday something happened, Sunday, and it's all used the same building. Well, maybe that's what you're talking about with the metro, the regional cities. They all have the same trucks, they all have the same kinds of things to make the city work, and if they could all join forces, maybe that would be a way to do this.
There's a good possibility. The problem, frankly, is that we got, just using Palm Beach County as an example, with the 37 municipalities in the county, we got 37 city managers, 37 fire chiefs, 37 city clerks, 37 public works directors. All those people have a vested interest not to change things. So how do you deal with human nature, which is, I've got mine, I'm going to stick with it, I'm going to hold on until I retire, and hopefully my retirement plan will be there. I think it's going to take leadership and courage and as you said, new ideas to get people to change their ways.
Well, and maybe it is I don't know if it's making people have, the pride is one thing, but maybe people do have to feel that they will still be important. Because when you take away a mayor, everyone can still be a mayor of a city or a fire chief, but...
That's fine. Nobody's suggesting they can't do everything they want to do, but they have to learn to do it in a constructive way that benefits everybody. When we lived in Ocean Ridge, they were really nice people. The city manager was a great guy. The police chief was a great guy. But nobody ever asked them what to do about traffic on I-95 because that's the state's problem. But what's the state's problem never gets improved because they're slave to federal financing for highways, and rarely do they ever put any money available to rapid transit, which is probably the only way how traffic can be improved over 20, 30 years.
That's true, but yet the traffic does actually affect their own city. They just don't realize it because you get off I-95 and then you dread to go.
The state hasn't invited the mayors of the 37 cities to say, okay, let's get together. What can we do to reduce traffic on I-95?
Good point.
There are many things, and the state legislators don't want to change things. They got their reasons, and it takes real leadership and courage.
I told you about Chris West, very smart young man, and he and I were talking about something, and the one thing, if he were president, is he would abandon lobbyists. He would say there are no more lobbyists, and I think that lobbyists are the real, well, let's just look at that. If you...
they're villains, no question. Of course, they're lobbyists for good causes, too.
Of course.
But big money has big lobbyists.
Right, and that's what that would be the problem too, because you're affecting every little city, and they have what they need, and so.
What you were getting at is true, but I don't know how to encapsulate it. But the answer is money. In other words, if there was we have a carrot and a stick system in our world. You get more with having a carrot than a stick. And I think that's probably going to be the answer. If there was a fund that would make it easier for the people to cooperate, then it might happen. But everybody's so conscious about dollars that nobody wants to be responsible for spending money for something that may or may not work.
It's really called, we can call it socialism in a sense, but it's not really. We still have capitalism, but we still have to think of what the good is for the whole. In addition, you can have both things, right. and that's why we do have things. I've always been impressed.
Florida is different than most places, but most cities in the United States, the center city that I described, has a school system. It's a center city school system that has to live on the taxes it can get in their boundaries. But sometimes they have 20 and 30 different school systems in one metropolitan area, and everybody has their own little. They got their 37 principals and 95 assistant principals, and it's pretty hard to change all that.
And yet, I've told you, Bill, that on one Wednesday a month, I listened to the Miami-Dade School Board have their meeting. I've been so impressed because the superintendent there is a brilliant gentleman who has somehow brought the schools in Miami-Dade into something that is magnificent. I think he was just nominated or elected to be the finest superintendent in the country, and he has changed things. I've never heard of a school board with such positive responses to everything, and it's really because of him. So when you talk about what you've just shared, I think of finding people with his motivation, with his intelligence, and bringing everybody together, because everyone's still, it's a happy place.
I assume that that's a unified school district.
It is.
And that makes all the difference in the world.
So that's what you've been saying, that you take a unified school district compared to everybody having their own, and it doesn't work.
Well, in Palm Beach County, we're lucky. We do have a unified system for the county, but they seem to spend all their time worrying about teachers' salaries and whether they want to have a reform system of teaching.
Well, that's happening worldwide now.
Everybody's in many ways is trying to do their best to make it right for the kids, but it takes leadership.
Well, one thing that I think, and I was not married to you when you were building Columbia, Maryland, but I've heard so many stories about things, and I know that the one thing you did before it was actually built in the planning was you had a work group with people, professors, people in the, where every great minds came together.
Well, we invited 14 experts around the country in to sit with us every 2 weeks for 6 months, and we asked them the question: what should we do to build a model city? And the guy in education had some ideas. The guy in recreation had ideas. The guy in service stations had an idea. The church people had ideas, we try to make the best. We try to take the best of everyone's suggestions and ideas, and test them for feasibility and costs, and therefore, and we use that you might call avant thinking to plan a new city and build it, which we did over 25 years.
Yeah, the medical system. I was thinking back. We all talk now, of course.
What?
Poor Barack Obama has been blamed for the having affordable health care, and yet when you built Columbia, Maryland, the one attraction that I thought was so ahead of its time, using the Kaiser health system in California, you brought the idea, and you could share that. And let me just say, from my own perspective, that every resident that moved into Columbia had health care for $20 a month. And I mean, it was amazing back then in the 1960s to do that.
My mother had moved to Columbia after it was up and around, after 10 years. And she had the same doctor for 19 years in that little health plan right in Columbia.
$20 a month.
Right.
Amazing. And, I mean, see, but yet that plan somehow worked there in Columbia because it was so well thought out, but yet it couldn't be replicated anywhere else. And that's the problem.
It's also changed a lot over time because the healthcare world has changed radically.
Well, Bill,
for good and bad.
I appreciate your being on the show. We've just now run out of time, and this is a wonderful interview. I'm so glad we're going to put you on YouTube, and I'm glad we got to talk about this. And maybe
YouTube, hooray!
And I'll see you later this morning, my darling husband.
Love.
Goodbye. We'll be back right after this.
Every day in the U.S., over 1,000 people are injured or killed in distracted driving crashes. Admit it, you've had some scary moments yourself. Did you know that texting for just 3 seconds at highway speed is like traveling the length of a football field blindfolded? For a safer drive, you need to have a Safe Drive system installed on your vehicle. The Safe Drive system alerts you with dashboard lights and a warning sound if you get too close to the car in front of you or if you stray out of your lane.
I was driving on I-95, and my mind was somewhere else. Suddenly, the system began screaming. I was in shock. I slammed on the brakes and was able to stop at the last minute. If it wasn't for the Safe Drive, I would have run into the car in front of me. The system saved my life.
You don't have to buy a new luxury car to get this important safety feature. Upgrade your car today with the Safe Drive system and protect yourself and your loved ones. Call 800-825-0997. That's 800-825-0997. 800-825-0997.
America was built by people with a few dollars and a dream. And while many don't know it, there's one path to success that still only requires a dream and about $10. That's right. If your dream is to start or grow your business, something as simple as the right business card could make all the difference. And today at Vistaprint.com, you can get 500 full-color business cards for only $9.99. That's right, only $9.99. Just go to Vistaprint.com and enter promo code 1919 at checkout. That's Vistaprint.com, promo code 1919.
Attention all listeners, are you ready for a free stock market webinar with philsgang.com?
Hi, I'm Phil Green at Phil's Gang. Learn to adapt September 13th to the Federal Reserve low interest rate stock market. No longer do we have a stock market, but a market for your individual stocks. Using the Phil's Gang charting system empowers you where you influence the outcome of your investment, short or long term. Learn to adapt to invest efficiently and intelligently. That's September 13th.
Join us September 13th at 12 noon Eastern for the philsgang.com free webinar valued at $75. Phil's Gang hosts Phil Grandy and Donald Cogswell will teach you how to adapt to this ever-changing stock market. This webinar will cover all stock market trading, all investing skill levels. You will learn how to protect your principal in this Federal Reserve-controlled low-interest rate market by identifying moves before they happen. To attend this free webinar, enter promo code GANG. That's G-A-N-G. Go to philsgang.com. That's philsgang.com. Call 877-600-4264. 877-600-4264.
This is one of the most exciting products I have heard about lately because I've been privileged to have something like this. And I didn't know there was a system that you could actually purchase. And I hope that everyone listening will really consider this. It would save your life. And so Jeff Smith, who's the marketing director of Safe Drive Systems in New York City, is calling us, and he's going to talk about Safe Drive Systems. So how safe is Safe Drive Systems, Jeff?
Quite safe. Thank you.
Well, why don't you explain exactly what this is like?
Okay, so Safe Drive Systems is a company and a product in the same. And the company is very interested in keeping the drivers on the road in safe and more attentive than they're usually aware of. There's a growing understanding of how distracted drivers are becoming, whether it be someone, using mobile technology or just, part of your everyday where you could even be daydreaming and that's a distraction. What Safe Drive Systems does as a company is it looks at all that and has put together technology in order to help drivers become less distracted and then warn them when there is road condition that could be quite
dangerous,
difficult
I guess.
as
Yeah.
far as that. Yes. Yeah, sorry, words in my mouth.
No.
So,
Well, excuse me, but when you say that, what would it do if a road condition? Because even though I have an alert system, I don't know it would say anything if a road condition's bad. What happens?
well, I'm saying road conditions like other vehicles that are around you, your vehicle, and it's the type of thing where the radar system takes in this information and it alerts you way in advance of somebody that might be slowing down too quickly or somebody that's crossing into your lane or you crossing into another lane, that type of road condition where it's constantly changing as you're driving, whether in the city or on highway. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, let me ask you then, this system, how does it get installed? Where does it actually go? Under the trunk?
So it's a two-piece, well, actually a three-piece system. You can buy a two-piece system or you can buy the three-piece system. Two different systems. The three-piece system is a radar, and a radar has the technology all built in, and that gets installed in your bumper. And then there's a speaker for the audible warnings, and there's the display. And the display has different displays that show you if you get too close to somebody or if a vehicle is slowing and it's getting too close to you. That's called our forward warning. And those warnings escalate as the time to, let's say, impact increases. The other part of the display is something called lane departure, and that is an additional camera that gets installed behind your rear view mirror, so it doesn't impede any of your vision. And what the lane departure camera does is it takes the lanes that are on the highway or in the city, as well as the signs that are adjacent to those lanes, and it takes in that visual information and just makes sure that your car is centered in that lane. So as if you drift unintentionally into one lane, left or right, the display will give you an indication, both audible and visual, about which lane you're drifting, whether it be left or right.
That's excellent. And so what I want our listeners to know is when you're driving, let's say you're backing up, typically if you don't have an alert system, you really may not know when you're too close and you wind up hitting something. Or if someone's going in back of you, like I was at Publix the other day, and I have a system and it started beeping and I saw someone was coming near my car. If I didn't have that, I mean, people are hurt in driving parking lots. And I think this is an excellent system, especially for, well, all drivers really, but I'm going to focus in on an older driver who doesn't particularly maybe have the same eyesight, the same perception, the same hearing. And this is, I think, should be installed in every car, Jeff. Now, probably the car dealers aren't doing that, but if they can buy something like this from your company, I think it's worth every cent that they would